It's interesting because you just pointed out Rishi Sunak said there's 10 days to save the country from a Labour supermajority. Well, the Lib Dem leader says we've got 10 days to save the NHS. And on waiting times in A&E in particular, we asked our People's Panel. This is a group of 10 people we've got together. Some of them are first-time voters, they might be swing voters, undecided voters. And what they want to hear from the politicians on health and social care as the election enters the final 10 days of campaigning. Here's what they had to say.
So, diagnosed with kidney stones early 23, and I'm still waiting for the operation 18 months later with a stent. In agony.
My son, suffering the way he has, and I've got to sit and watch it, is absolutely disgraceful.
I think they should pay what they're asking for, and let them get on with their jobs.
I think social care's pretty much been left out. I think a lot of it's been about the NHS, and expectedly so. But social care certainly needs a reform. Social care is important to millions of people across the country, and I don't think it's until people require it that they actually realise the importance.
So as a psychotherapist working with young people, I've seen many struggling with access to support. There's a massive backlog and early intervention is critical in preventing these conditions getting worse. The parties are all promising all these solutions to the mental health problem, but if they have this magical pot of money, why have they not used it sooner?
We're joined now by the Mail's Andrew Pierce and the Mirror's Kevin Maguire. Thank you both for joining us.
Morning.
Right. Now, look, people at home, watching this at home, will all experience some really bad experiences with the NHS, whether it's just getting a GP appointment or waiting for a long-term appointment. But this is A&E. And I was just thinking, going, you know, if in the end you think, if I don't get a GP appointment, if I'm really ill in this country, I just go to A&E, don't you? People just go, well, just go to A&E. You just think, well, you'll be OK, A&E. You'll be fine once you're through the doors.
I think that's part of the problem.
It is?
Because they can't get to see a GP.
Yeah.
Well, clearly.
They go to A&E and then they're stuck there for hours. Or days, as it seems.
19,000 NHS patients in England waited 3 days in A&E.
That's a city mini break. That is going away for a long weekend and you're stuck in A&E.
So you go in, you're registered, you might be triaged, but that's 3 days before you get treatment or you're admitted into the hospital or into a ward.
And I suspect unless you've been lost in the system and you're somehow being forgotten, it's because more serious cases come in than you.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you get bumped out, which you understand. It's for, you know, people with kids are always seen first. I've no objection to that. I've seen my daughter, you know, take my grandkids in, and I think that's right. But you can keep getting bumped down. But 3 days, can you imagine? That's 3 days and nights.
And also the pressure on the doctors to make that split decision. We spoke to actually a family last week whose daughter Mia passed away. She was sent home by the doctors because the virus was saying, well, you just got a boring virus, go home. Now,
she had meningitis.
And she had meningitis and died. Now, you can just about understand what a doctor's going through. He's got to make a decision and he has to, you know, when you're dealing with that many patients coming in, you've got some of those decisions aren't going to be the right ones.
The pressure's enormous, and from the receptionist to the nurses, the paramedics, to the doctors, to the ancillary staff, the support staff, and then of course they're juggling. Where can we put all these patients? We haven't got the beds. We haven't got the the little cubicles. It's absolutely dreadful. The stress levels are absolutely enormous, and they perform miracles. We've all got great stories about the NHS too and saving lives, but it's not functioning the way it is supposed to. I mean, it's not just the waiting list. What, 7.5 million, close to a record, went up during the election campaign, which there's a political side to this, of course. But you go to A&E and it just doesn't function. But you ring up the NHS helpline if there's anything, particularly if you've got kids, and I know this as a grandparent, if you've got any problems with your kids, they'll almost certainly say go to A&E, go to A&E. Now that's probably sound advice, but it puts more pressure on A&E.
Just to remind everybody of the target, Andrew, the current A&E standard introduced in 2010 states that 95% of people arriving at A&E should be admitted, transferred or discharged within 4 hours. The standard has been missed every month since July 2015. I mean, we are not meeting that standard. And in fact, 400,000 patients wait more than 24 hours.
Yeah, it's unacceptable.
Honestly, Andrew, you look like you've given up.
Well, look, the NHS has been a huge problem for a long time.
Yeah.
I will add to the point, I don't think doctors going on strike and nurses going on strike has helped the situation. No. We have to bake that into it. It's caused a huge backlog.
There's still not a deal, is there, with
there's
the
no deal,
doctors?
no, and it's very difficult to get to see a GP because of the contract. But having said all of that, this is a real problem.
2015, it's not been hit since 2015. Way before the strikes, way before COVID, which, let's remember, started in 2020. And waiting lists doubled before COVID from 2010 under the various Conservative governments because they put the tightest financial straitjacket on the NHS in its history. And they squeezed the life out of it. And I think that's, we're seeing the result of that. COVID, of course, was awful, the impact, and sent waiting lists spiralling. But they doubled in the previous period.
Our the member of the People's Panel who said that he's waiting for a kidney stone operation. 18 months. 18 months. I mean, I have to say, as someone who has experienced kidney stone, it is the closest pain to childbirth.
Agony.
And it is agony. And I can't imagine having to wait more than a couple of hours for that to be dealt with, let alone a year and a half. So my sympathies with him. The target for urology is that a condition like that, as I understand it, should be dealt with 18 weeks from referral. How is somebody still waiting? I can't imagine the agony that Kevin's still going through.
I just say 18 weeks is still 3.5 months. And I mean, that is long enough to wait, never mind going 18 months. Yeah. And it's a relatively simple solution once you get there. But you need the staff and the equipment, and you need the facility, and you need enough.
And I wonder if people watching this program think they've heard anything from Labour, who are going to win this next election, who've been traditionally the custodians of the NHS, created the NHS, how it's going to be so radically different because they're not announcing the extra money for, I would say, not the money that the doctors and nurses say they need to really seriously tackle this. Are they going to look at alternative ways to, i.e. private options? Well, people like Kevin Maguire would have a heart attack if you're going to do that. I mean, because I think this is a big beast that's out of control. A big beast that's out of control.
Take an aspirin.
And I don't think there's any real political will to get to grips.
And also, Andrew, if you just add to that, the IFS have warned that public services are at risk of sharp cuts, and we're not getting any clarity from either the Conservatives or Labour, and honesty to say, come on, let's be honest, you can't deliver everything you're promising because there are going to be cuts. Mark Franks, as Director of Welfare at the Nuffield Foundation, has warned his lack of clarity should be addressed both in the remaining 2 weeks before the election and in future electoral processes. The NHS is broken, Kevin. Realistically, can Labour fix this? And if they do, it's not going to be until probably not even in their entire first term. You
can't do it without money. And Keir Starmer's fond of saying he's got no magic wand. Well, you're going to have to be a magician if you think you can fix it without serious extra cash.
What are they going to do?
Over the last Labour government, health spending trebled, and they got to the lowest waiting lists in history, as Starmer says, the highest patient satisfaction. If you're not proposing that now, and there is limited extra money going in from those very few tax rises they're backing, but that 200 million extra appointments, 40,000 a week, staff working overtime, I'm sounding like West Streeton here, but those 40,000 extra appointments, how many of them are seeing a GP? How many of them are having a scan? And how many of them are actually having an op? It's going to take a long time. The resources that Labour's promising don't match the scale of the problem or the Labour rhetoric about how we're going to fix it, how it's devastating.
Is forcing the wealthy to go private really a problem? Isn't that going to be the fast-track solution? I mean, otherwise, we're just going to be playing catch-up. We're never going to solve this.
Unless, of course, more doctors get so fed up with working in the NHS, they move into the private sector.
Well, it's kind of happening a lot, isn't it? A lot of them are moving abroad.
That is a problem. Right.
So we're seeing it in dentistry.
The strikes have to be resolved. There's a junior doctors' strike starting on Thursday in England. I think it's 5 days.
Outrageous.
Now No.
Yes, it is.
I wish it wasn't.
They think the Secretary of State now is going to write a cheque 5 days before an election.
I wish it was.
It is vile and political. It's overtly political.
But
it's a disgrace.
It's a disgrace. This strike is not about...
It's a disgrace.
It's not about the Tory government.
Yes, it is.
It's not about the Tory government.
It is.
It's about the Labour government. This is firing a shot across the bow of Wes Streeting to say, when you become Health Secretary, which is expected on the 5th of July, and all the polls could be wrong, and T and C's apply, but it's expected he's going to become Health Secretary on Friday, July the 5th, the day after the election, and they're saying you've got to take us seriously to negotiate.
Thousands more people have their appointments cancelled on the altar of the BMA's political expediencies.
Well,
it's a political strike.
No, it's doctors have lost a lot of pay.
If you're right about the polls, Kevin, then Wes Streeting would be the person who's going to have to fix that. So we're going to talk to him in about an hour's time, actually, here on Good Morning Britain. Huge number of people getting in touch. And I just want to put two different points of view here. One person I'm going to leave anonymous because she says, I'm now in my 41st year of working for the NHS. My goodness, thank you for your service. I've never known such extreme waiting times in A&E. The ageing population are living longer with multiple care needs. Social care's lacking, meaning patients that are fit for discharge can't go home. No community care. It's not the hospital's fault, it's the lack of community services. So that particular NHS veteran saying it's about the lack of social care. Meanwhile, another chap who works in a hospital a lot of the time in A&E says common sense has been completely lost. Last week, someone came in with stomach pains for the past month, hadn't bothered contacting her doctor. And it's people like that who are clogging up A&E. But the trouble is, of course, you're worried that if you ring the doctor, you're going to be told...
Well, if you can get an answer.
Well, firstly, you've got to get through on the phone line.
Yeah.
And secondly, you've got to explain your problem to the receptionist. And thirdly, you've got to hope that they say there's an opening today, otherwise it's in 2 weeks.
I mean, that person could probably have gone to their local pharmacy.
Possibly, pharmacy first.
To our NHS veteran, I think Wes Streeting will say they're going to buy beds in care homes to move people out of hospital. I don't know the numbers, but we've all got to take responsibility for our health and prevention. But nevertheless, you still need a functioning NHS when you do have those severe pains. You can go and get help. And if you can't go and see your GP... And
you see, I think a lot of people...
What are you going to do? You're going to go to A&E?
A lot of people are going to vote Labour thinking, at last, we'll get the NHS sorted. In 3 years' time, they're going to be hideously disappointed.
No,
you know what
it is?
There'll be major changes.
Unless it is sorted.
The NHS
I doubt that.
Public services do much better under Labour. And they've got a state people can see. So many of them are not working.
Are Labour going to fix the NHS? I wouldn't put a bet on it unless, of course,
but you get the direction of travel. Yeah. That's what Labour has to do, because you inherit a mess. You can't solve it overnight. No. You have to get a direction of travel where it's getting better, it's improving.
But also you get the nub of Adil's joke,
I do.
Andrew, which is that the Gambling Commission is now apparently investigating, in Robert Peston's, the esteemed Robert Peston's words, many other officials over election bets. So he wrote in his blog, the Gambling Commission is investigating other individuals linked to the Conservative Party or to the government who bet on the date of the July election. He says he understands it's a widening scandal that is undermining the general election campaign. So this began, Craig Williams placed a £100 bet on a July election. And after that, the booking giant, which owns Ladbrokes and Corals, notified the Gambling Commission, made the disclosure to the Commission because Mr Williams is an MP and therefore classed as a politically exposed person. Commission then wrote to all the gambling companies requesting details of any individual who had bet £20 or more on that July election within days of the Prime Minister, calling it on the 22nd of May. And that initial trawl yielded many names. Is this going to get even worse?
I think it is. And I think it's disgraceful, because I think it's really cut through. Even if the amounts they were going to win, maybe it's a few £100s, well, that's quite a lot of money to some people. Yeah. It's the principle and it's the point and it's the suggestion that, oh, well, we're going to lose, but we'll make a bit of cash on the way out. Because we can, because some of us are in the loop. because very few people were in the loop about that Prime Minister's, as it now appears, rash decision to call an early general election. Craig Williams, who you referred to, of course, was his parliamentary private secretary. Not very important in terms of ministerial ranks, but a lot of meetings with the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
He would have heard...
Eyes and ears.
He would have heard the dates.
The latest revelation over the weekend, to bring people up to speed, from the Sunday Times, Nick Mason, the Tories' chief data officer, he denies wrongdoing, but the report accuses him of placing dozens of bets.
Yeah.
I mean, what is going on? I mean, this feels and smells like Partygate. This is, yet again, something really toxically bad at the heart of our government.
Yeah,
and lessons aren't being learned.
Michael Gove made that point, actually. The Tory cabinet minister standing down, doesn't want to lose his seat. And it does, it stinks, because it stinks of having privileged, entitled access, and then you're cashing in, and the allegation, making money. Now,
Noses in the trough.
Now, Williams has admitted he's admitted an error of judgment. He was going to make 500 quid. Because they've looked, all the bets they've looked at, you're going to win £200 or more. And there just seems to be this incredible cluster of people around Sunak, not himself, but people around him who would have been involved in information and would have heard what was going on, all seem to have decided they want to go to the bookies.
Well, it's a form of insider.
Online.
And it feels like perhaps a decision has been made. Don't put too much on because you'll get you'll get noticed. But
well, it looks like
another way to get noticed.
We're different. You lot, the great unwashed out there. You just have to do whatever. We're gonna cash in. It's toxic.
And for people working hard in this Tory campaign, which is terrible, it's just yet another kick in the teeth, isn't it? Because I think those people in the loop around the Prime Minister behaving really badly again.
But a personal detective has been arrested and suspended. Two, the campaign director and the data head have had to take leave of absence. But what I can't get my head around now is Sunak refusing to suspend the two candidates. Bristol North West, they won't win that seat, but Montgomeryshire, Williams, is a seat they held and they hope to
Let me tell
hold
you,
again.
There's a lot of Labour campaigns on the streets
in
Montgomeryshire.
Well,
Let me tell you.
And
I think there's lots of jokes about William Hill.
It's stop the bets.
What is Sunak's thinking? Because, he probably knows they don't stand a chance in this election anyway.
Yeah, he knows that.
They're going to lose maybe a couple of seats by suspending these. On the whole, he balances it out. Surely you think, I'll lose those two.
There'll be
a little bit of integrity, professionalism, accountability, integrity.
The logic will be, I mean, I'm not following the logic, but the names...
You never do.
You're hoping there's a logic. You're hoping there's a logic.
The names don't come off the ballot paper, so they'll still be on the ballot paper. So you can suspend them, but they're still
So therefore, why not suspend them and make it look like he's done the right thing?
Well, I would have suspended it.
He's like a punch-drunk boxer who's wandering dazed around.
Unless he thinks there's more to come, and he thinks, well, if I start suspending these two, I might have a long list of suspensions.
I think there's many more candidates. I think it's people closer to people who worked within Number 10.
Or does he create an enemy from within?
He may not know how many more.
It is a mess, and it does cut through, and it's horrible.
It is. I mean, when James Cleverly, the Home Secretary, was unable to say, confirm or deny whether any ministers had put a bet on, saying not to my knowledge. You'd hope that it was...
I suspect a minister's name would have come out by now. I'd have thought.
I think Cleverly won't know. But the very fact he's frightened there might be somebody.
Yeah.
Because you normally would say, no, of course not.
Absolutely,
we know, we've checked. It's just not true.
Why these idiots would sacrifice their reputation and career to earn a few hundred quid? It's pathetic.
But it's where you can be in power too long, your judgment goes completely, it's time to kick you out, really, and... refresh, and also some of them know they'll be out of jobs.
They'll be out anyway, exactly.
So
£200, big deal.
4 of them, it's still allegations. One has admitted it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Shall we talk about Nigel Farage?
Yeah, he's having an interesting election.
My goodness. He went a bit crackers at the Mail on Sunday yesterday, didn't he? Not happy at all with the way that the Mail on Sunday had interpreted his interview with Nick Robinson. He's spoken to ITV Tonight, which goes out tonight, as I understand it. Let's have a listen to what he talks about, what he says about Ukraine.
I think the West, historically, up until a few years ago, provoked Putin stupidly. There have been no sensible, substantive negotiations of any kind. And even if negotiations to try and find a peace, to try and find a way through failed, I think it's better to have those negotiations than not.
Right. So he says that the West provoked Putin and that it's time for negotiations. I wonder if that will cut through, Andrew.
I think this has been very damaging for him because there's pretty universal support for Britain, the West, backing Ukraine. Remember, this started in 2014 when he illegally occupied Crimea. The West did nothing. And then there was the second stage, which we're involved now, and the West has rallied behind Zelensky, a European country under siege, on our doorsteps from a predatory gangster who's never come to terms with the collapse of the Soviet Union. That's Putin. Putin wants his Soviet Union back, and Ukraine is part of it.
Kevin, I'm sure everybody agrees Putin is the bad guy here, and a pretty nasty piece of work.
Vile.
I wonder whether the negotiations line, though, is something that might have an impact.
Yeah, it might, but he's hardly a neutral figure in this Farage, given his past admiration for Putin, because he goes weak at the knee at authoritarian white nationalists. I mean, that's what it's all about. That's why on the right of British politics, the hard right, a lot of them admire Putin. And he says, oh, it's not as a person, but just the way he was as an operator. But nevertheless, given what you know. But most conflicts end with negotiations in some way. But is Putin going to give up the 20% of Ukraine he's taken? And I can't. If somebody who thinks that invasion was unprovoked, I think NATO might have made some mistakes, but it was unprovoked. Putin wanted to expand and do an old school territory grab. You say, let's have some negotiations. Well, that's up to the Ukrainians, actually. It's their land that's being stolen. It's their people who've been killed. It's their people who've been raped. Their kids who've been stolen and taken over into Russia. It's they who've suffered the war crimes. I don't think we, in Britain or any other country, should be trying to dictate in any way to Ukraine how they defend their country and their sovereignty.
Can we talk about the Rwanda policy? Because that's immigration is the issue that Nigel Farage and Reform UK really want to make this election about. And we had this chap, James Sunderland, describing the Rwanda policy. Now, I'm just trying to get to the notes. Kevin, you can remind us. James Sunderland, remind us who he is. And why what he said was so devastating.
He's the Home Secretary. James Cleverly is at parliamentary aid.
There we go.
And he said it was. Now you see, I don't want to take it off from you for an off-com word. What would you say? It was like trap, but it began with C. I think is what he said.
We can say that word. Can we not say that word?
Well, Laura Kunsberg said it yesterday morning while I was sitting there in the studio, so I think we can say, but we can actually play it. Here we go.
All right. So.
The policy's crap. OK? It's crap. But it's not about the policy. It's about the effect of the policy. Yes. There is no doubt at all that when those first flights take off, it will send such a shockwave across the channel that the gangs will stop.
OK, if you couldn't exactly hear that, I'll repeat it. James Sunderland said about the Rwanda policy, the policy is crap. OK, it's crap. But he says it's not about the policy, it's about the effect of the policy. There's no doubt at all that when those first flights take off, it will send such a shockwave across the channel that the gangs will stop.
And just to highlight, he knew he was saying something wrong and probably anti-government line, because before that he asked, hope there's no phones on, there's no one's recording this, are they? Before I said it.
And he's an aide to the Home Secretary who described the policy in a word that I can't say.
Bat shop, I think he said, but it was a different...
Bat poo.
Bat poo, yeah.
Do they not back their own policy, Andrew?
Well, what he's saying, once the planes go up, of course the planes aren't going to go up now because the first thing Labour are going to do is reverse the Rwanda policy. But the point that Tory MPs would have said is if the planes go up, they really thought they were going to act as a deterrent. We saw evidence of that in Ireland when we saw migrants desperately getting out of Northern Ireland, going to Southern Ireland because they were worried if they were in all that, they'd end up in Rwanda. So there is evidence at work. But the fact is the policies cost hundreds of millions of pounds. We've now had 2 Rwandans have gone. You probably missed the second one. The second one last week.
Yeah, but that was voluntary returns.
Voluntarily, so 2 out of a policy that's cost 150 million. But all I say is, good luck when his lot get in, because they've got no policy at all.
But you supported this, though, Andrew. I've been on before with you. You said this was the right thing to do.
Better than nothing would have, in my view. Better than nothing, because I think it might have acted as a deterrent. But his lot say, we're going to tackle the gangs. Well, the Tories have been trying to tackle the gangs for years, and it's not working. So just all come on in when his lot get in. That's what's going to happen.
Here's our mess. You clean it up.
They'll all be coming in.
We've spent all the money.
Don't you worry about it.
We've given it all away.
That's Labour's.
Or perhaps have a more open and fair visa scheme.
Yeah.
Actually,
No, it just mean more.
Safe and legal crossings for some people, yes.
Labour. It'll just mean more of them.
The majority of people who do get over in those boats have a legal reason to stay in Britain.
Be in no doubt, lots more under Labour.
Andrew, the thing is...
Rubbish. You failed.
Illegal migration is a tiny proportion of the huge increase in immigration.
Well,
that
trust me, both will soar under Labour.
There's 700,000
but we know
illegal.
I know, but we know why the government is focused on people in boats and to whip people up and get bigotry and racism and people really angry. It's because they want to hide what they've done. And after Brexit was sold in 2016, actually it was 8 years ago. This morning, wasn't it?
Do you know what? It's 8 years since I said on this programme to Nigel Farage, as we, reported the fact that Leave had won the referendum.
We must have been here.
And I said to Nigel Farage, does this mean 350 million will now go to the NHS? And he said no.
And he was right.
They should never have claimed
He always said,
that.
of course, that wasn't his claim.
That wasn't his claim, but it was a huge claim of the Leave campaign.
Because he came in here in his alcohol aftershave and was dancing hi-ho silver lining in front of me.
Well, you can't blame him for celebrating.
I'm sure he hadn't been drank anything. It was just sprayed it on.
Don't most aftershaves have a bit of alcohol?
Kevin, yes, good point.